Hi everyone, my name is Becca and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you stopped by. Here in this channel we cover all things middle grade literature, specifically focusing on the first chapters of your favorite middle grade novels. Today we're in for a treat because we are going to read the first chapter, actually the first two chapters. The first chapter in this book is a bit short. The first chapter of A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall by Jasmine Warga. Now, Jasmine Warga has written tons of phenomenal middle grade novels that you may be familiar with. A Rover's Story, which came out pretty recently, The Shape of Thunder, and Other Words from Home are some of her super popular middle grade novels that you may be familiar with. So I am really excited to dive into this novel. We're going to start by reading the front and side cover, which is going to just give us an idea what this novel is all about. A painting has been stolen. When Rami sees a floating girl in the museum, he knows he has seen her somewhere before. Then he realizes she looks just like the girl in the painting that has gone missing. But how does her appearance connect to the theft? Agatha the turtle knows. She has been watching from the garden. But she can't exactly tell anyone, can she? Will Rami, with the help of his classmate Veda, be able to solve the mystery? The clues are all around them, but they'll have to be brave enough to really look. This is a whimsical, moving story about the universal desire to be seen and understood, and how art can help us find connection even when we are at our loneliest. All right, so the first chapter, like I said, is very short, so we're going to read the first two chapters. And let's go ahead and dive in. There is an illustration at the very beginning. And there is also an illustration of some of the characters in the book right before the start of the first chapter. And let's dive in. Chapter 1 is titled, In Which the Turtle is Introduced and a Painting is Stolen. Our story might not truly begin with the turtle, but I'm going to start there. The turtle in question is named Agatha. Her name was given to her by a human who had noticed her existence. Most humans did not notice her existence. Agatha is important to our story because she lives in the garden behind the Penelope L. Brooks Museum. In the warmer months, she moves slowly, very slowly. She is, after all, a turtle, nibbling on food left over by picnicking families. During the summer, the garden behind the Penelope is a very popular picnic spot. Occasionally, a human will spot Agatha and clap with delight, but mostly, she is left alone. In the winter, she tunnels underground to hibernate and to stay away from the cold. Turtles prefer going underground to wearing winter coats. The day the painting was stolen from the museum was the warmest day that Maple Lake had had so far that year. The sun beamed down on the garden. That heat and goldenness radiated into Agatha's burrow. A warm, bright wedge of sunlight woke her up. She crawled very slowly out of the burrow. She happened to emerge at just the moment that the robber was scurrying away with the painting. She saw the culprit. Agatha noticed many things about the thief. She noticed their height, their clothes. She noticed how quickly they moved. Turtles are good at noticing. But she also noticed that the sun that had felt so warm in her burrow didn't feel quite as warm up here above ground. She tucked herself back into her burrow. She would wait for warmer weather. Chapter 2 is titled, In Which There Are Mysterious Marks on the Wall. Rami was staring at the marks when he heard the voice. The marks were faint against the cream-colored walls, barely there. A scratch more than anything, really. It looked as though someone had taken a pencil and lightly etched a couple of stray lines. Rami blinked. When he opened his eyes, he expected the marks to be gone, but they were still there. Because Rami's mom worked at the museum, he was frequently forced to spend time here. Immediately after the theft occurred, Rami had stayed away from Cherry Hall, the room in the museum where the stolen painting used to hang. But then he worried that the staying away made him seem guilty somehow. So he came back to Cherry Hall in the afternoons and just sat. Sometimes he would read his book, sometimes he would do his homework. But now it was spring break, and he didn't have any homework, and he'd already read his book twice, which meant all that was left to do was stare at the wall. And staring at the wall was really very boring, until he noticed the marks, until he heard the voice. On this particular day, Cherry Hall was completely empty, except for Rami, of course. It was Monday afternoon, which meant the museum was closed, and the cleaning crew, which his mother oversaw, had already done their full mop and sweep of the room. The walls had been wiped down and the frames had been dusted. Everything was sparkling. Even the empty space on the wall where the painting that had been stolen had once hung. The stolen painting was called Untitled. Literally, that was its name. Its name was its lack of name. Rami thought everything might have been easier if the stolen painting had a proper name. While he stared at the mysterious marks on the wall, he thought about the missing painting's lack of name. He tried to come up with a title for it, but he couldn't think of anything good. It was then that he heard the voice. At first, he stayed very still, but then he heard it again. This prompted him to stand up from the bench where he had been sitting. He looked over his shoulder. He didn't see anyone. He looked to the side. He still didn't see anyone. He was convinced that he was alone. He wasn't alone, but he would figure that out soon enough. Rami moved closer to the wall. He reached out instinctively and then quickly withdrew his hand, remembering the paramount rule of art museums: no touching. This was a rule his mother had reminded him of over and over again. "We're lucky they let me bring you to work," she'd said, "but you have to behave, be quiet, and absolutely do not, under any circumstances, touch anything." Rami had thought it would be a whole lot luckier if he was allowed to stay at home, by himself, like all the almost 12-year-olds that he knew. But his mother was a worrier. When he asked her about it, she would say, "You can't blame me for being a worrier. I was born in a war zone." "Maple Lake isn't a war zone," Rami would answer. "That's why your father and I came here," Rami's mom inevitably would reply, "because we wanted you to have a better life in a safe space." "Maple Lake is safe," Rami would say. The conversation had this circular nature. His mother explaining that they came to Maple Lake because it was safe, Rami agreeing that Maple Lake was safe, and then Rami asking to stay home alone because of the aforementioned safeness. But he never got anywhere, which was why he was here on this particular afternoon in Cherry Hall in the Penelope L. Brooks Museum, which everyone in Maple Lake simply referred to as the Penelope. No one in Maple Lake had cared much about the Penelope until 2 weeks ago when the painting went missing. Now the Penelope was all anyone wanted to talk about. "Hello?" Rami heard the voice say. The voice was quiet at first, scarcely audible. Rami spun around. He still didn't see anything. Not yet, but he was getting closer. "Hello?" the voice said again. He glanced back at the wall, and it was there on the wall that he first saw her shadow. This time, when he turned around, he saw a girl. That is the end of the first 2 chapters of A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall by Jasmine Warga. I hope you enjoyed this read aloud today, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing so you can be notified every time we have another First Chapter Friday available for you. Until next time, everyone, happy reading!